God doesn't give us patience. We learn it along our life. And I was like, that's so true. I learned that in the military was patience.
Produced by Podcast Architects.
You're listening to the Lead On podcast, where we discuss experiences in the armed forces while exploring lessons from military leaders.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders. I'm David Dearie with the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. Thanks for joining us today, and I want to introduce you to my guest. This is Mr. Brent Bowers. Brent is the founder of Landshark, also known as Zek Buys Houses and Zek Buys Land, multiple business entrepreneur, Army veteran. Unique thing about Brent is he joined the Army as an enlisted, and then eventually moved into the officers realm. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And he joined a little later in life. You know, so many of us joined at 18 years old and maybe 18 to 21. You know, Brent was already somewhat established before he joined the Army, and I can't wait for you to hear his story and what he's doing now. So, Brent, thanks for being here. How's it going today?
Good, David. Thanks for having me. We finally made this happen, and it's crazy. We were both thinking, we should cancel because we're so busy today, and both of us were having the same thoughts, and both of us decided not to cancel. I did cancel two other engagements today. Sometimes as busy entrepreneurs, visionaries, leaders, we really stack too much on our plate sometimes. So I'm in a season of basically unstacking. It's either a heck yes or a heck no lately. So everyone I say yes to, someone else is getting a no.
You know, and before totally launch, and I ask you that opening question, I'll just comment on that. And I think that's something about our military upbringing, if you will. I think we have a natural tendency when you have an entrepreneur type of personality to overstack, but even more so when you served in the military, because they cram 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag, and saying I can't really isn't 2 words in our vocabulary, or 3 if you make it I cannot. We will. So case in point, here we are, and I've learned over the decades of my life, if there's something I really don't want to do because it's too hard, that means I absolutely need to do it. And so that's why I chose not to cancel today, and I'll recoup the time. So, but hey, listen, Brent, with that, I'd like to ask my guest just to kind of kick things off, since we are going to talk about leadership, and ultimately I really want to something with you, and we haven't captured as a leadership landscape, what that means, and how understanding a person's landscape, especially as a leader, understanding your own landscape, will help you understand the landscape of others in which you lead. But you really got to start with yourself. But before we get into that, we've all been given, we probably have given, and we've also heard bad leadership advice. So, what's maybe one of the, worst pieces of leadership advice somebody ever gave you, or maybe you heard somebody give somebody else and thought, man, I don't ever want to do that?
Yeah. I'll say the worst piece of leadership advice was, I had a conversation yesterday with one of my coaches, and I was telling him about something that, I'm struggling with right now. And I told him that I am afraid to share this with the people that love me and the people I lead. I lead quite a few people in the Landsharks community, and I was a leader in the military, and I'm a leader of my team. And I told him I didn't want to share it because I was struggling with this, and it's something that's been in my life for a while. And I didn't want to share it because I want to be larger than life to the people I lead. And he said, that's where leaders fail, is because you lead these people and they think that they've got to be perfect all the time and have no problems. And we all put our pants on with the same, one leg at a time. And I told him, I was like, man, that struck me, because I have these leaders and these coaches and these mentors, people that pay a fortune. They're just perfect. They don't swear. They don't drink. They don't smoke. They're their farts smell like roses, like all these things, and they make you think that, and that's bad leadership. I struggle with things in my life all the time, and I've tried and replace bad habits with positive habits. You can't put one thing in. I'm sorry, you can't take something out without something else going in. Again, Parkinson's law. We'll talk about that. But yeah, so that's the worst piece of leadership advice is my wife called me a fake the other day. It struck, man, it hit like a punch to the gut. What she was meaning was, like, we can go from like arguing a knockdown, drag out fight, and 3 seconds later I can jump on a podcast or a business call and be the nicest person ever. And yes, it hurts on the inside to do that, but yeah, it's totally a fake. So we all fail. We all go through really hard crap. And I think as leaders, we should share more of the vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. A buddy of mine who speaks at our Foundry class, he'll often say, you got to suck the suck, so you got to admit, there's going to be hard times, and it's managing those times. Even we do a lot with mental health, and mental health it's a managing it, right? Doesn't mean that this is who I am, this is how God created me, and not necessarily don't want to change who I am, but I could manage some of the things that make difficult. So good. Be authentic, be true, and be vulnerable. And it means a lot when people can see their leader being vulnerable and being real. That's how we establish trust. And if you're not going to establish trust, you're really not going to lead. Which, I dive right into. You talked about. I had asked you, when we first met, why'd you go from enlisted to officer? And I think, trust was an element in that. But before then, let's go way back. Let's go to the way back machine. And let's talk about, what was the first business you started?
Yeah, and another reason why I wanted to be an officer, I didn't want those bastards telling me what to do anymore. So, but
yeah, the young
it didn't
ones,
matter
right?
because they were
younger
like
than you.
They were like majors by the time I become a second lieutenant. So once again, another one I'm turned into my boss once again. So anyhow, it's funny how the military worked. My first business I ever started, man, I was always a sales guy. After Hurricane Andrew hit Miami, Florida, 1991, I believe. We had this crank up radio, and I didn't think we needed it anymore. We borrowed it from my grandma. I went door to door to sell that thing because I was like, there's going to be no more hurricanes like this. And then we started selling creepy crawlers. I talked my buddy into letting me use his machine, and I gave him a portion of profits, and we would sell these little tiny creepy crawler things on the side of the road. Then I borrowed the neighbor's lawnmower. Well, no, I mowed the neighbor's grass with their push mower and then borrowed it to mow someone else's grass. And then my grandpa gave me a riding lawnmower. We fixed it, me and my dad, and I started a lawn business that's still going today. It's still that lawn business.
You were in 5th grade when that happened.
Something like that. I don't even know. But yeah, I was pretty young. I think it was fifth or 6th grade. And my dad actually ended up coming out with me about a year after I graduated high school because I needed to hire a second person. And my dad's like, you know what? I'd like to get out of the job I'm in. He had built another company for someone else, and things change. So he wanted to kind of be his own boss. And I was ready to take a change too. I was working on getting my real estate license. So he came out, we built the business enough to where it could support him as well. And I went and did my real estate stuff, left the business, and he's still got a few accounts to this day. Now my dad does land investing now as well, which is, I keep telling him, I said, Dad, when you're on that mower, you're losing money. But I think he enjoys it. He's done manual labor his entire life.
So then you get into the land business or the investment. So how long did you do real estate before you joined the military?
You know what? I got in 2007 was my first real estate deal, and I'm a slow learner. I was reading the Donald Trump books, The Art of the Deal and stuff in high school, and I ultimately wanted to start in 2004, finally got my license in 2007, bought a rental property. Actually, it was a first-time home buyer, and then turned it into a rental like a month later in 2007. So 2 years, almost 2 years of failing in real estate before I said, you know what, I need to reset. I need to go back to college, figure out what I'm going to do with my life, because 2008 in real estate was a little tough time for me personally.
Sure. Tough for a lot of people in our country. And so, what was it that drove you into the military at 24 years old? Were you married then? Or?
Yeah, I was married, and things got so tight financially, we ended up breaking lease. I called them ahead of time, said I'm not going to be able to afford next month, and broke the lease. And freaking come to find out, I was in Afghanistan, and I realized my credit was trashed. I had this collections notice from all 9 months of lease that I broke. I thought I was doing them a favor by moving out. But yeah, they put me on collections. I had to pay all that, and it ruined my credit. But yeah, I had bills to pay. I wanted to reset in life, and we had to move in with my in-laws, like a 900 square foot house. I love my in-laws. And it was tough though for, two adults plus her parents plus her baby sister to live in a very small house, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. So that was pretty cramped. It was a good time though. I wouldn't trade it for anything, the whole experience of the military.
Yeah. So then, a lot of humility early on in life. So you joined the military. So what'd you think? What as we start branching into this landscape? What was the landscape like for the first few years, or what you did about 8 years? So what'd you learn from that experience?
Yeah, I went from having a business to making pretty darn good money, then to go into real estate and getting behind on a lot of bills, and then my E1, then E2, then E3 salary just didn't quite cut it. So, I was doing things in basic training and AIT to make additional money. When guys were going out to party, I was sitting in the barracks figuring out ways I can make money. And it's just, I needed to excel very quickly. So I ended up getting to E5 position as sergeant within like 2 years and 1 month. So I accelerated pretty quickly. And then put in for, active duty green to gold to become an officer, got denied the first time, then did it again. And plus I was on a deployment path where it's like every year it was 1 year on, 1 year off. So, luckily that college, that 21 month gave me about a break, 2 year break. But yeah, I learned a lot, discipline, heartache, patience. Like my wife said the other day, Emily said the other day, God doesn't give us patience. We learn it along our life. And I was like, that's so true. I learned that in the military was patience.
Mm. And so when did you transition out?
May 2018. I was completely out. 8.5 years. Haven't had a real job since May 2018.
And then were you working on your entrepreneurial skills while you were on active duty, or
Absolutely.
Was it a clean cut from active duty and then getting back into the entrepreneurial world?
No. I like once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. I've got stories. I would hook up the guys with AFN network, the American Family Network, for $25. I would run them a line in their room, and they'd have cable for the next 12 months of deployment. So I made pretty good money there. And then, I would go off. This is, I hope I don't get like some type of, in trouble for saying this, but I would take my Humvee off of the, Fob Shank. We were on Fob Shank, RC East, and go off of the American compound right into the Afghan compound and buy cigarettes, and then sell them to my buddies for like $10 a pack. And then my conscience caught up to me. I was like, man, this is not right. I'm ripping my buddies off. And plus it got a little scary too. Like I shouldn't have been doing that by myself. So the entrepreneur and the sales, that never stopped. And then, when I moved my family, in 2015, brand new second lieutenant, across the country, we had our first baby. something changed. I was like, I got to get out. I was preparing for my third combat deployment to leave again. And my first marriage didn't work out. My second deployment, that marriage ended. And, I feel like history can repeat itself if we're not very careful, which it does. It does. Read the books. So I saw history repeating itself, this time with children involved. So I was like, I can't leave again for another. I mean, sometimes deployment's a year and a half. You train up for 6 months and then you leave for almost a year. So I was like, I can't do this again. So I need to figure something out. So I started searching voraciously on podcasts and listening to everything and turning my vehicle into a mobile university. I started getting up at 4 a.m., 2 hours before I had to be on base to work out, to start building a business again. And that turned into land investing. And I started buying and selling vacant raw land. And within about 18 months, I was up to over $9,800 a month payments coming in from land that I sold on payments, seller financing. And I put in my letter of resignation, we call it a refrad when you're an Army officer. And I was seeing my cohort, my classmates that went through and became quartermaster officers at the same time as I, getting denied. And this, don't even waste your time. They're not letting officers out right now. And I said, they'll let me out. I just knew it. And sure enough, they approved it, and I was out. I was out 2 years later, and I literally had a $55,000 net profit that month. And I was like, okay, God, you definitely blessed me. I made the right decision, because I was scared. Like 8.5 years, it's almost like on the borderline of institutionalized, because you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. You don't have to think about anything except for, because you're told where to be, where to go, where to live, all these things.
You're listening to Brent Bowers on the Enlisted Leadership Foundation podcast, Lead On Lessons from Military Leaders. You can learn more about Brent Bowers and his ventures, Land Sharks, by clicking the link below. So, so what are some of the standards, that you took away with? You kind of, through your last few minutes, you talked about the transition experience. So, what did you learn in your 8.5 years in the military, enlisted an officer? That has helped you, build your business with your family, and and are some of these traits, these qualities, have you found them to be somewhat universal in veterans? They, many of our listeners are looking to hire veterans, but they may say, man, they don't meet the position description. Where I'll tell you, there's many times I want to say, just give me a chance. Look at what I've done, or look at what they've done in uniform. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, that right. You just said it right there. Well, you can figure anything out. You can learn any job. What I loved about the military is about time you started to learn your job, they put you on another one. You changed, or locations changed, or job description changed, people changed. So much change. We're guaranteed only one thing in this life is change and death. You can get out of paying taxes. But it's how to figure anything out. And if you don't know how to do it, there's someone else that's come before you. And it's the same thing in the outside world. There's always someone else that's done it before you, that you can, pay them for their time or provide some value to them. Same thing in the military. I mean, so many people, there's so many great leaders that will sit down with you and mentor you. Like, there's so many people. I had that in the enlisted side, and I had it in the officer side. And I really thought the enlisted side did a very good job of that. Very good job of that.
Yeah.
The officers could with improvement.
What specifically on the enlisted side? What's something that somebody made just a really impact?
Well, I'll tell you, Dennis Tolley, Sergeant First Class at the time, me, my wife, and my dog landed in Bamberg, Germany after like days of travel. They sent me all over, and we had already traveled however long the freaking flight was from Florida to Germany. I mean, we were exhausted. Days of traveling. I went from one base to the other. They found that I'd never been deployed, sent me out of that base, go to Bamberg. We arrived, me, my dog, my wife, and it's like we're in another country. We've never been here before. And Sergeant Tolley picks me up and said, come with me, brought us to his house, woke up to breakfast the next morning, took me to PT, and just made sure everything was taken care of. Got us to our house. I remember his wife took us to our. We ended up moving off base because they didn't have any housing available for a married guy on base. And it's just that right there. And then, oh, by the way, like that next evening, he's like, "First Sergeant wants to meet you." They took me out to my first pub in Germany and had my first German beer, and it was just like really cool. I was like, man, this is a family here. So that, like, I just assumed everyone was treated like that, and I think it's because we were in another country, and that was just an amazing unit, an amazing set of leaders. I mean, those, like, I'll never forget those guys.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when we're stationed overseas, there is that sense of a community, much more than I saw here stateside. I often felt that stateside, especially when we weren't in that whole training and deployment season that you mentioned a little bit ago, that it's just a job, right? I go to work, I do my thing, and then I go back home. And unless you're a single sea bag or a geographical bachelor that is living on base with the others, that's your community. But from a family perspective, it's kind of like, I'm away from the ship in my case. I want to go home and just focus on my family now. Just, it almost to the point you want to do what you can to not look like you're in the military. But yet when we get out, we're wearing our, retired ball cap and our USS Peleliu or whatever, right? Then we want people to know that we served.
I see that a lot. That's so funny. Yeah, because when we would go have our 4 days in Germany, we would go to all these other countries and we do our best to look like fit in with them. But then I see these old vets, man. They're proud of it. It's they got American flags flying from their hats.
Right? Oh, I know. Well, so listen, Brent, we're about out of time, but we didn't get into your business. So I really appreciated we're just talking about just the landscape where you found yourself needing some direction, recognizing both when you joined the position that you're in, and then using that experience not to repeat itself 8.5 years later, and setting you and your family up for a transition to depart the pattern, if you will. But if it's okay with you, I'd like to bring you back next week, and we could explore more about this Parkinson's law that you mentioned in the intro, and tell us about land investing and land sharks. And you even mentioned that you have a coach. I'm sure you do some coaching. So if you're okay with that, then I'm going to tell everybody to go back and listen to this a couple more times and join us back here next week. Are you good with that?
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to save that close-off question until the actual end of the show. But for now, I'm David Dearie, joined this week with Brent Bowers, founder of Landshark. You've been listening to Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders from the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, and we'll see you next week.
Produced by Podcast Architects.